Sri Lanka, and my head was going to places such as the Tamil genocide, which brought me here today. My head was going to places like going back to Sri Lanka and what that would mean to me and who I am and how I would be perceived. And what I realized was it's complex. I'm complex, and the more layers I peeled, I realized that there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of stuff that I need to understand. Today, just listening, it really made me cautious of the fact that I do need to turn back and feel that pain and feel in order to heal. And I wanted to talk about a Tamil poet named Bharaviyar, who has really been part of my entire life journey. So when I was young, my mom used to play poems and songs by this poet Bharaviyar. And as I grew older, I started reading and listening to Bharaviyar poems. And there was a time in my life where I found it really difficult. Right after I finished my undergrad and I had no job, and everyone around me was telling me, you got to find a job. You got to find a job. You can't just sit around. And it was a very low point for me. And I came across this poem, and it for me was something that really resonated, and I woke up to it every day. I would read it. It's been like now, like I know it, and I read it every day because it gave me the lessons I needed. And so I'm going to share that poem with you today, and here it is. So I'm gonna read it in Tamil, and then I will go over it in English. தேடி சோரினிதம் தின்று பல சின்னஞ்சிறு கதைகள் பேசி மனம் வாடி துன்பமிகு உழன்று பிறர் வாட பல செய்கள் செய்து நரை கூடி கிளப்பருவம் எய்தி கொடி கூற்றுக்கும் இறைபணியும் மாயை பல வேடிக்கை மனிதரை போல் நான் வீழ்வேன் என்று நினைத்தாயோ. This poem is about being able to be the change and not falling into assumptions and being who you are, and to get up every time you're put down, to get back up. And the literal translation would be spending days consuming routine food, speaking petty tales which is of no good, toiling in vain with a dejected spirit, doing deeds which possess no merit, churning snow with gray hair, burdening life within your lair. Like so many people who live in vain, did you think I would follow suit and be struck down as well? And the importance of Bharaviyar is that so this is a poet of the 1900s, and he spoke about women's rights and breaking down the caste system back in the 1900s, when this was like unheard of. And I don't know if you can see here, I'm wearing a t-shirt that represents Bharaviyar, and it says in Tamil, Rautiram Palagu. Rautiram means anger, and Palagu means practice. And in the 1900s, his phrase was Rautiram Palagu, means practice anger. And his thing was that anger is a good thing. It's needed. And you need to know where that anger is needed. And that was one of the things that he shared. And today, I want to show someone to you all that I dearly hold very dear to my heart. And she's been very active with us today. This is Bharati, who I named after the Tamil poet Bharatiyar. And, Bharatiyar spoke a lot about women's rights and he said, Pudimai Pen. Pudimai Pen basically means new woman. And he spoke about, he envisioned a woman. And my hope, sorry, I'm getting emotional, but my hope is that my daughter one day becomes the woman that he envisioned. And so this is Bharati, and it is an honor that I got to share one of my favorite Bharatiyar's poems. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Stephanie, and I wanted to share a little something. I guess it goes with this class as well, but especially of last class, where we talked about I guess it was like a lot of things that resonated with me last class, but specifically the text that was read about how to decenter the settler, and how do we decenter ourselves to be decolonization. And what came up for me was silence, because that is the language that I learned first. I was born and raised in Maryland in the US, and my mother migrated there from El Salvador in the 70s, right before the Civil War broke out. And silence really is the first language that I learned through her. And for me, at first I understood silence as weakness or as a cowardly thing. And I was very critical of my mother not really sharing much of her experience with us or history with us. We grew up with just my mother raising 7 of us that were born in the US. And then our eldest sister living in El Salvador was raised by my great aunt when she was alive. And because of my mother's personal history and trauma, she refused to talk a lot about our own familial history and personal history. And because of that, I grew up resenting her choices of staying silent on a lot of things that I felt was, or I was entitled to, because it was like my history as well. But as I've gotten older, and I guess like decolonizing and understanding, or I realize now that I've been doing this work for a while, I just didn't have the words or the language, this language to kind of say that this is essentially what I was doing. But really I was healing and finding these ways to kind of make sense of it. But what came up for me was silence, and to decenter myself as settler is to center others. And for me to, the first step for me to do is to just shut up and listen, and to center Black and Indigenous people, to kind of see, I guess, what steps to take and what they would want to see. But silence is definitely a language that I learned first, and thinking about language justice for me, it brought back memories of attending graduate school, and how as much as I tried to speak the language that is spoken in those spaces, and it was very, very difficult for me to keep up, to understand the conversations that were happening around me, trying to engage in conversations in class, and feeling as though I'm always trying to catch up, with just like having an understanding of what certain words meant. I grew up, we grew up with just single mom, 7 kids. So you can imagine it was pretty rough financially. And I didn't have, my education was, one could say, not that great. But in trying to speak the way people spoke in grad school, and then teaching the following semester after graduating, I even found myself in front of my class, feeling the imposter syndrome and not feeling adequate enough to even be in front of the class and speaking, because the students there spoke better than I did. Because of that, I kind of walked away from academia. I haven't returned. I taught that one semester, and realizing then that even the limited language that I had while I was attending graduate school and while I was teaching, even the limited language that I used there, was still being stolen away from me by my white peers and my white colleagues in cohort. And that also with the graduate school experience is it just has left me to kind of turn my back altogether from academia completely, in trying to make changes there, or trying to do something there. I worked very tirelessly over the syllabus of the first class that I taught, and seeing how much work I put into it, and then watching other, white adjuncts not really doing that work, but we still, I guess, it just the playing field did not feel even, and that labor I was not ready to continue to give to the institution, at that time. Like I just was not. And so I was mentally tired, psychologically tired, emotionally tired. And and I turned my back away from academia. So I joined y'all not as a educator in the traditional sense, but here to learn and to continue to push my understanding of decolonizing and realizing today that I have to decolonize possibilities and what I think is possible. I realize now I have to decolonize my understanding or thoughts and possibilities of future, love, joy, good, and life altogether. So yeah, I have a lot of work to do myself. Thank you for everyone for listening.
In our reading for the Leanne Simpson, I'm going to probably butcher this title. It's page 95, is Panina, Ishpanina. There was, oh, sorry, 1 second. Let me find the actual page. It was not that one. It was the Lost in, sorry guys, let me find that page. Page 55. Yes, so it's actually page 56. There was something that was said between the characters in the piece, and it said that the theory of white people had a plastic arrow tacked with a piece of cardboard, and they flipped to see which group of people they were going to screw over, and the arrow, like, you would flick it to see which how many spaces to move, like a game. So according to him, the people that were on the board were Jews and Indians were on the board. And then the next thing that it says is that those that never get to touch the arrow have to stick together, because you never know when it's your turn, when your turn is coming. And that just stood out to me so much, because when it comes to the different aspects of the injustice, you know, I find sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm doing this, I can't focus on this, you know, problem because, you know, I'm kind of working on the Black Lives Matter, or, you know, I'm like more of an LGBTQ ally, I can't really talk about, you know, the Black Lives Matter. And I feel like we fail to understand that we are all in the same boat. The fact that we are all fighting against one problem, and the injustice are all connected, and we need to come together, because as someone was speaking before about there's power in numbers, if everybody that is facing injustice sticks together, I truly believe that this work in decolonization will definitely keep gaining steps and gaining weight. And that's just something I thought about, because, you know, I do a lot of my awareness and spreading awareness through social media. And I've gotten into some conversations with people, as even Black people, in regards to standing up for LGBTQ communities. And they're like, oh, well, what are you going to do? Fight against everybody? And I'm like, yeah, as an educator, I believe that is what our job is, title is to fight against social injustice, to stand up for social justice. So if I can't do that, by spreading awareness simply by posting something, then I'm not in the right field, right? So I just wanted to share that.
I don't know if we're allowed to comment on it or if we're supposed to, but I have to say that Clelia's text is making me incredibly uncomfortable, because it's really bringing up a lot of memories of violence against women, of silencing of women's voices, particularly women of color, racialized women. It's just very violent. It's making me very upset. Which is not to say that it isn't a text that needs to be seen or read or understood. I'm just saying that for me right now, it's really, I can feel it.
Hallie, could you elaborate on that? Are you talking about the meme or are you talking about the duct tape on her mouth?
The duct tape. I love the meme. The meme's amazing. It's the duct tape on her mouth.
I found it so inspirational actually, because she was, for me, it's a demonstration of something that we tend to hide, is the silencing of women of color. And so I feel like she is throwing that out there for all of us to pay attention to.
For the early years. That is yes, no, Rose, I have the same feeling from what you're feeling in regards to the duct tape. And Hilema, I also understand where you are coming from in regards to that pain of the abuse that women have gone through. And as I'm looking at her braiding her hair right now, I see the lost and missing Indigenous women that, you know, we tend to forget about, and we tend not to hear about and learn about. So that's what I'm feeling from this.
That resonates a lot with me. During the FLQ crisis of 1969 in Quebec, my even though I'm about 3.5 hours from Montreal and located in Maniwaki, Quebec, specifically Kittigan-Zibi and Anishinaabe, my reserve, my grandmother was shopping for winter jackets in October 1969 with her mother, my great grandmother, and across the street there was a Bank of Nova Scotia. And during the FLQ crisis and all the terrorism happening in Montreal and all of that, there was another group of people. There's people that decided to rob the bank when my grandmother and my great grandmother were shopping across the street. And the police came and they had a mitrailleuse, I think it's a machine gun. And as they were driving away, like fleeing the scene of the crime, they were shooting rounds anywhere and everywhere on the street. And a stray bullet went and struck my grandmother in between the eyebrows while she was holding her mother's hand. And I always, as an Indigenous woman, Algonquin and Cree, I was like, okay, well, like it's just a little bit removed, but it's just too close to home. One of my cousins went missing about 12 years ago, and we're still fighting to figure out what happened, and people still get away. Like nobody was held accountable for my grandmother or my cousin, and that doesn't even include my father's side of the family. Thank you for that.
I would like to share. I really don't know. This is my first time as well. I am feeling really emotional right now. I can't stand it. I have this weight on my chest right now. Hearing everyone. Well, it started with Clelia and of course the duct tape. I'm not really good at expressing myself. I usually feel that I'm shaking right now. Anyway, I'm not even sure why I'm sharing with you. I just wanted to share, and I think you all understand where that's coming from. I think I really don't know where to start. I want to help everybody. I know I come from a white woman of privilege. I recognize that. I am just starting my journey of unlearning. I don't want to do everything I can, but I just really don't know where to start. And whatever I do, is it right? Is it wrong? Am I saying the right thing? Am I saying the wrong thing? Am I saying something? I'm not saying something. Anyway. I just wanted to share that for whatever it's worth. Thank you for listening.
I just wanted to add, just to be clear, Rose, the point that you brought up is absolutely right. I mean, this is like I said, this is a text we need to talk about. This is a text we need to see. There's so many layers to it. It's again the onion. I mean, the braiding of the hair and combined with everything. So I'm in no way saying that, this is so disturbing, get it out of my face. I'm just saying that this is what this is really bringing up. And like I put in the comments, it's because so often when you hear about murders of women, there's a taping of the mouth. They wrap the tape around their head. I've read and seen so many stories where it's this duct tape and they've got this whole forensics thing where they can match, but it's just, it's just so much. It's so symbolic in so many ways, and of everything that we're dealing with here.
That we're going through.
Am I saying your name right? Halima? Halia?
Hallie.
Sorry. Hallie, your emotions and like everything is so valid for you to express. This work that we're doing, as previously mentioned, is like the hardest thing. It's easier to close our eyes and just continue in the complicity, right? And this is harder to deal with in every aspect. So your emotions and your experience and what you feel right now is completely valid. So thanks.
I don't know if I have been desensitized about this, because I see Clelia and I see her holding the duct tape in her hand. And I am suddenly not worried anymore, because I know she had the power to take the duct tape off when she wants to. And I see her braiding, and I see she still has power to create a text while she's being silenced by a duct tape that she still controls. So probably like I'm not reading that violence because the violence that I am being subjected to is a lot heavier than just duct tape. I'm talking about, you know, being murdered, and then after being murdered, the picture of your body is shared like everywhere, and then you're blamed for dying when you were murdered. You know, you take the blame for the way that you are dying. You know, and if someone killed you at a party, it's your fault for being a slut and going to that party. So that kind of violence, like I am already in this. So I don't feel other kinds of violence anymore. I live with the constant knowledge that 10 of us are killed daily in my country, and that the next femicide is going to be in the next 3 or 4 days in my state. So I'm just happy that Clelia is alive, even if her mouth is shut. You know, like, and maybe that's not the perspective I should be having, but that's like I'm taking joy in this, like a small sign of life, that is her still being free, still being present, because she could pretty much not be here, you know. And I don't know, I'm comfortable with the silence. um I'm maybe a little, it's maybe a little bit awkward to take turns in speaking right now, but like I'm okay with the text. It doesn't make me emotional because I had to make myself strong in situations like this. I don't know. Maybe like maybe I am overwhelmed by everything else.
I wanted to also respond to Gloria's point because I really also, I guess what I'm experiencing through Clelia's text is a kind of joy, as opposed, so it's almost the opposite of the, it's joy because of the acknowledgement that it's extremely violent. So baby, sorry. And I think that there is something about my interest in what happens in a classroom is about responding, initiating and creating emotion in the people in the room, and to having, I was just having a talk earlier today about sex in the library and why it was important to have sexuality as a integral part of library space and like what that could look like. And the grounding to it was about not, making sure that the space was not sterile and not normative. And that if sex becomes normative, then it's, you know, queer. Like we have to move beyond a space of comfort. And I was reading up on a pedagogy that I'm not sure that I'm in tune with yet, but I'm still learning about it, which is senti pensante, which is supposed to mean sensing, oh no, what's the pensar? Sensing feeling pedagogy. And I'm not good with Latin, but it's ultimately is about evoking emotion in the classroom and how to do that and how we agree to certain parts of learning in academia, and that we have to step away from those agreements of hierarchy or those agreements of the teacher talks and the students listen, like all of the agreements that we sit with, and then working away from those. But ultimately, I think if people are not feeling something, then they're actually not alive. We're not experiencing knowingness. We're not connecting. And so I think that the excitement that, because I had my camera, I sort of had my Zoom screen on a different page, and then I like went backwards. I was like, what is everyone saying yes to? And then I saw Clelia and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I just started screaming because it was, to me, an acknowledgement that whenever we think we know what something ought to be and the confinement and boundaries of a space, there's always a way to push against it and do something that can evoke emotion within that space.
I wanted to talk on a, I guess on a male perspective, where me being a man, I have been very privileged in terms of having that patriarchal sense of having things uh, lent easier to me despite being a queer person. For me, the silencing of women that has happened since the beginning of time, for me, this is a very poignant movement or a poignant demonstration, because I come from a very matriarchal family, and having a picture of very strong women throughout my family, for me, I can see that that's how it's very challenging, because I know there's a lot of women to this day who don't have those freedoms and those rights and those independence, and just being able to just be, let alone showing sexuality, being a single woman, financially stable, having a job, driving a car. And that's kind of the perspective that I took from that.
I guess for me, it's hard to make an impact, especially in the educational system. You're talking to these folks, that are privileged and that are, from that background, and you're saying your belief and your understanding and how, we need to remove this Eurocentric lens and views of how we teach and how we support students, especially of diverse backgrounds. And it doesn't connect to them. It doesn't get through to them. And being one minority in that school, how much change can I do or impact when, it's really up to them to make that decision. And that's a struggle I face is really trying to, impact positive change to build and support student success and allow for that culturally responsive lens and teaching pedagogy. But it's not happening, and we talk about this growth mindset, and we talk about you know how we're breaking these barriers, but they're not being broken. And it's sad in the educational system, as we have these teachers that don't have this understanding and foundational background, and and then need to take a course like this to really understand what their biases and assumptions are, and who they are and what they're teaching. So, it's just, it's such a great topic and ideas shared in social justice, but how do we, again, make the impact with everyone else in the building? We talk about small change, but, I try to do that and nothing is happening, so. Yeah, and just as a safe place, it's definitely not a safe place. And I always tell educators, I say, just because the students are looking happy and have a smile on their face, it doesn't mean that they're in that safe space. We're talking about inclusivity and diversity. How are we reaching those milestones? And we're not. We're far from it. We talk about, oh, here's a poster, or here I'm reading a book, a text, and we're far from it. The conversations are not happening at the, student level, or at the educator level, or at the administration level, or even at the board level. It's just hearsay. We sort of implement something and that's it, and nothing ever happens.
Yeah. Sorry, I wanted to add about everyone's talking about safe spaces and safety. During my time in graduate school, probably 2016, something like that. I don't remember the year, but a young woman of color was murdered on campus, and it shook the entire campus to its core. And I, in my program, it's a predominantly white school, and there were a lot of students that were upset, and the instructors tried to console them, and a lot of people were asking, this is supposed to be a safe space. This is supposed to be a safe space. We're supposed to come here to learn. And, there's such violence on campus. And my only response at the time was safe spaces don't exist. And for a lot of people in this country, we don't even know what that word means. So yeah, I never believed in the terms safe space when I started hearing it more in academia.
That reminds me of a question that I had about the Coat Meek, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, Coat Meek reading on trauma. One of the questions that I have is, as educators, when we generate traumatic memories, what is the responsibility that we have to care for those that have been traumatized? Or I should say re-traumatized through reliving that event. I certainly don't feel equipped to provide sufficient care.
Can I respond to that? Just even though I said I wasn't the one to ask, but I've been thinking about it since you've asked it. And in one of my courses that I teach, students have to write letters to people who are incarcerated. And this semester I'm grading the papers and finally getting to one that was sent like maybe 2 weeks prior, where a student talks to me about her sexual assault that she experienced while simultaneously going to and from court right before class to put the person in jail. And she's a white woman and he's a Black man. And the trauma that she was experiencing during this course. And I had to sit there and say, what do I write to this student, right, who just wrote this like full 1,000 word unveiling to me and hadn't said anything throughout the class. And so, I mean, regardless of what I said, because who knows what I even said, I think that that's something that I think about all the time is in the class, we do go deep and we go hard, and people cry, people start to unpack wounds that they've come to the classroom with. And I know you're asking like whether or not we're equipped. I'm not a psychologist, and it's not therapy, but I do feel like that's probably the most learning that they'll do in the program is in that class, because they've had those experiences, and that they have to bring those experiences with them to the work that they're going to do. And so it's about building, I think, an environment of trust where people can take the trauma that they're already walking with, right? Like, we're not traumatizing them, we're opening them up, right? And giving them a space to put that into the work and really connect that to whatever they're dealing with and whatever they're reading, and like making these connections real for them. So I think that, you know, whether or not that's what is happening for them that moment is to not, you know, not for something I can judge, but I think going forward and speaking to, you know, past students, they definitely respond to acknowledgement that they hadn't had another place to bring their whole self to their graduate program. So hopefully that helps.
I've screamed, I can't see you, blinded by the need to understand my suffering. Look the other way. You've never been there for me, cherished or adored me. Crucify me nobly, but he said no.
What should the world burn for, if not for all the broken necks of black folk? The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are asleep at home with their families. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are at home with their families. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are with their families. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are asleep. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are at home. The cops murdered Breonna Taylor at home. Cops murdered Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was murdered. How should the earth turn quiet, if not by God's judgment or a black mother's rage? Righteousness has its place, but all the rooms here are occupied. Obviously, a white mother ain't ever had to snatch her son down from a tree, turn his neck the right way, and hold his no breath, stepping over these lips, mouth up against her breast. Scream until her voice rattles, until she can't tell you all she ever wanted to be was a mother. What is all this death about? And why won't the angels blow the trumpets for Christ to come? A dying man cried out for his dead mother. Christ, if you won't come, at least send her with wings and a bulletproof chest. How even in their blues they can't treat our sadness. How even in their blues they pretend our grief is but a plaything. Burn this world down if we can't walk this earth without our necks binding the sturdy part of the tree. Burn this world down if our skin be too much night. We be people that know water, know about the Atlantic and baptisms. We know how to walk on it and how to drown perfectly. But God, if we can't have breath, we ask for fire. Fire this time. Fire, Lord, this one last time.